Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's Monday night here in New Delhi and it's been a busy weekend. Last week, the Canadian Prime Minister launched a diplomatic offensive against India. Now, India is taking the fight to the finish. New Delhi has launched a widespread crackdown on Khalistanis. Their properties are being seized, and these people are based not just in Canada, but also in the UK, the US, and Australia. Tonight, we'll tell you about India's plans and actions and the world's response. There's a concerted effort to whitewash the image of a terrorist, to paint Niger as an activist and a plumber, not a man who tried to break up India. In Africa, another setback for France. After months of resistance, Macron has given in. French troops will leave Niger. In India, global investors plan to pour in billions of dollars. A new survey says Indian startup success rate is among the highest in the world. Biden is wooing Pacific leaders at the White House as we speak. A new twist in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Why America is betting big on Vietnam, and a capsule carrying the largest asteroid samples lands on the Earth. We'll tell you what this is about. The headlines first. The first Abrams tanks from the U.S. arrive in Ukraine. It's a big boost to Ukraine's faltering counter-offensive against Russia. President Zelensky, who has just returned from the U.S., confirms the delivery. At the start of 2023, Washington had promised to provide 31 such tanks to Kiev. The Philippines removes Beijing's floating barrier in the South China Sea. Manila called the barrier a violation of international law. Beijing had defended the installation, citing security reasons. The South China Sea is disputed, with Beijing claiming 90% of it. Standoff in Kosovo ends after a day of deadly clashes. It started when a police patrol was ambushed. The gunmen then fled to a monastery near Serbia's border, leading to a gun battle. This is one of the gravest escalations in years. Tensions have been on the rise between Kosovo and Serbia. Mali's junta delays the presidential election. The polls scheduled for February were aimed at the return of civilian power. The junta cites technical reasons for the postponement. They're yet to announce new dates. They've ruled Mali since 2020. In Pakistan, television anchor Imran Riaz Khan is finally back home. He was missing for more than 4 months. Riaz was arrested days after protests broke out following Imran Khan's detention in the month of May. Last week, the Lahore High Court had ordered the police to find the journalist by the 26th of September, which is tomorrow. India shining at the Asian Games. The women's cricket team defeat Sri Lanka to win the gold medal. This was the team's maiden appearance at the Games. It is India's second gold medal at the Asian Games. And Hollywood writers to end their strike. Screenwriters and studio bosses have reached a tentative deal. The strike has lasted nearly 5 months. It is one of the longest walkouts in the history of the U.S. entertainment industry. Canada has made another serious blunder. On Friday, the Canadian Parliament welcomed a guest. And no, I'm not talking about Ukrainian President Zelensky, although he too was a guest. I'm talking about this man, 98-year-old Yaroslav Hunka. He was a special guest. Canadian lawmakers and Zelensky celebrated him. They gave him a standing ovation. The Canadian speaker called him a war hero. Today, he's sorry for using those words, because this man is not a war hero, he's a Nazi. And the Canadian government has egg on its face. The same Canada that claims to have credible intelligence about India couldn't figure out that there was a Nazi in their midst. Tells you a lot about Canadian sleuths and their abilities. They say they've intercepted communications, exchanges involving Indian diplomats, and that the US has provided more information. But it's all top secret. They still haven't shared any of this proof with the world. What about naming Nijjar's killer? Or investigating Khalistanis, or cracking down on their separatist campaign, or probing their links to terrorists? What has Canada done on this front? Dragging their feet and living in denial, that's what they've done. But it seems India is not waiting anymore. New Delhi is going after Khalistanis and their sympathizers in India. Raids are being conducted, properties are being seized, and there are plans to cancel OCI cards. These are cards granted to people of Indian origin to give them better access to India. But Khalistanis won't have them anymore. Like I said, it's been a busy weekend for the Indian security establishment. They conducted multiple raids A house and some agricultural land was seized. This was in the Indian state of Punjab. These properties were owned by a man called Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. He's a Khalistani. He leads a group called SFJ, Sikhs for Justice. SFJ, it's a banned outfit in India. Pannu himself was declared a terrorist by India in the year 2020, and for good reason. He is the face of SFJ. He regularly features in their videos, making hateful comments, threatening the Indian leadership and challenging India's sovereignty. Last month, Pannu led a rally in Canada. He raised the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He called for the political assassination of Prime Minister Modi and his team. Nijjar was shot in the month of June. He was shot dead. He too was a Khalistani and a designated terrorist. Canada has launched a diplomatic war with India over his death. Their Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke about it in Parliament last week. He said, "There's an Indian hand in the murder," although he hasn't given any proof yet. Neither has his government. There is limited information in the public domain, and most of it comes from selective leaks. The Canadian establishment is planting stories in the Western press. These reports claim that Canada has intelligence intercepts, but they do not get into the specifics. As for India, it denies all the allegations and it has been asking for proof. But this is a dangerous game. You see, Justin Trudeau is fanning the dying embers of Khalistan. His words and actions have infused life into the separatist campaign. They want to break India up, to form a separate state called Khalistan. And this movement has a violent history. It led to the assassination of a sitting Indian Prime Minister. It also led to Canada's worst terrorist attack, the bombing of a civilian plane. But while India sees this as a national security threat, the Canadian government sees Khalistanis as a vote bank. They will not crack down on these separatists. So India is doing the needful. After seizing Pannu's property, assets of other Khalistanis have also been identified. They're based not just in Canada, but also in the UK, the US and Australia. Their properties could be seized too. And India could go after their OCI cards. OCI stands for Overseas Citizenship of India. An OCI card is a form of permanent residency. These are given to non-resident Indians or NRIs. If you have an OCI card, you can travel to India without a visa, stay here indefinitely and even work here. Now, reports say India plans to revoke such access to Khalistanis, so they won't be able to travel to India. There is no official confirmation on this yet, but last week New Delhi cancelled visa services to Canadians, so the OCI move may follow. Reports say dozens of OCI card holders are on New Delhi's radar. They face the risk of losing their cards. India is taking a strong position on this. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is in New York. He gave a statement, and the statement has raised eyebrows. Listen to what he said. "I think more than political will, there is political pressure for change. There is growing sentiment in the world, and the global south, in a way, embodies it. But there's also political resistance. They will all mark the right things, but the reality is still, today, it's a world very much of double standards." Now, this is being seen as a dig at Justin Trudeau. He remains adamant about taking on India. But some of his ministers are taking a softer line, like Bill Blair. Bill Blair is the Defence Minister of Canada. Yesterday, he spoke about Canada's ties with India. He called it an important partnership. Let me also quote from what he said. "We understand that this can be and has proven to be a challenging issue with respect to our relationship with India." Blair said Canada will continue its investigation into the killing of Niger. At the same time, it will pursue partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. So is there a division of sorts in Trudeau's team? Or is the ground being prepared for some kind of truce? Reports say there is talk of a back channel in Washington, D.C., of the U.S. trying to broker peace. We'll be keeping a close eye. Let's talk about the man at the center of this face-off. Not Justin Trudeau. I'm talking about Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Who was he? To put it simply, he was a man who wanted to break India up. A designated terrorist and a Khalistani separatist. But Canada has conveniently forgotten that. For them, Nijjar was just a citizen, an upstanding member of a great community. Listen to this.
Of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen.
A foreign government may have been involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen.
India were involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil.
You heard them. No mention of Khalistan. No record of his separatist activity, just a citizen. Western media is worse. Look at this article from the Globe and Mail. The BC plumber whose murder became the catalyst in a geopolitical crisis. So what if he plotted terror attacks by night? In the mornings, he was fixing the neighbor's pipe. I have more examples. Global News calls him a prominent advocate for Khalistan. The Guardian calls him an activist. A BBC article says Niger moved to Canada in 1997. Now, I must say, moved is an oversimplification for what he did. Niger went to Canada on a fake passport. His asylum request was rejected by Canadian authorities. Does the BBC mention that? No, it doesn't. Not here. All of these articles follow the same template. They even use the same words. A Sikh leader, an activist for an independent state, and a plumber. This is whitewashing of a terrorist. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was linked to bombings in India. He was accused of running terror camps in Canada. All of this information was given to Justin Trudeau's government. But what did they do about it? Nothing. Canada put Nijjar on a no-fly list. That is the punishment for trying to break up a country. You get put on a no-fly list. The fact is, Nijjar was living a double life. You can't define such people based on their day jobs. By that logic, Osama bin Laden was an engineer, Ayman Zawahiri was a doctor. Do you hear people calling them that? You don't, because it's common sense. So why is the West defining Niger as a plumber? Because it builds sympathy. It helps them put more pressure on India. Just think about it. Which headline would you feel sad about? Canada accuses India of killing designated terrorist, or Canada accuses India of killing a plumber with 2 kids? I think the answer is clear. You see, the idea here is to build a narrative where you're hearing just one side of Niger's story. The part where he's a plumber, the part where he's a community leader. The other side is conveniently downplayed. The part where he tried to illegally enter Canada. About his association with Babbar Khalsa, which, by the way, is also sanctioned by the Canadian government. The same group blew up a plane in 1985. It is the biggest terror attack in Canadian history. Yet, Nijjar was just a plumber. His double life is not that hard to spot. Look at this Canadian news article from 2016. Back then, Nijjar was linked to a bombing in India. He defended himself to the newspaper. Listen to what he said. Hardeep Singh Nijjar told the Vancouver Sun that he is a hard-working plumber and proud Canadian who has no time for Indian separatist politics. No time for Indian separatist politics. That was Nijjar in 2016. So why was he organizing Khalistan referendums? Why was he traveling to Pakistan? This is not some mysterious puzzle that has stumped Western media. This is willful ignorance. And the Canadian government is doing the same. They're yet to accept that Khalistani separatism is a problem. Trudeau has linked it to freedom of speech. It's a blatant double standard. From the 1960s, Canada has had its own separatist movement. French Canadians wanted independence for Quebec. And how did Ottawa respond to that? In 1970, they invoked wartime powers. Tanks rolled into Quebec's capital of Montreal. Guess who was the Prime Minister then? Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau. Do you see the double standard here? Canadian separatism must be crushed with tanks. And Indian separatism? Defended as a plumber's innocent hobby. This hypocrisy must also be called out. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was a bona fide separatist. He wanted to break India up, and he was accused of using violence to do that. So our message to Canada and Western media is this: call a spade, call a separatist, and call a designated terrorist a designated terrorist. Don't do PR for an enemy of India. On to Africa now. The staring contest between France and Niger has ended. President Emmanuel Macron has blinked first. He announced a major decision on Sunday. He said French soldiers and diplomats will leave Niger. Listen to this.
La France a décidé France has decided to bring back its ambassador. And so, in the coming hours, our ambassador with several diplomats will return to France, and we are ending our military cooperation with the de facto authorities of Niger because they no longer want to fight against terrorism.
Some context now. Niger is currently under military rule. Soldiers deposed the elected president in July. Their enemy number one is France now. Paris has deployed around 1,500 soldiers in the country, in Niger. It's part of an anti-terror operation. But Niger's junta says, we don't need your help. Around late August, they issued a deadline. The French ambassador had to leave in 48 hours. Macron said, no way. He said the ambassador would stay in Niger's capital. So what has changed now? Why has Macron made this U-turn? Maybe because it's a losing battle. The junta has settled into their new job. They've announced a new government. They've even appointed 21 ministers. So the time to reverse the coup is gone. The ECOWAS has also lost interest. ECOWAS is a bloc of West African countries. They had threatened to use force to reverse the coup. All words, no action. So Macron had two options. A, he could stick to defiance, keep the French soldiers and diplomats in Niger. Or B, he could live to fight another day. And the French president has chosen option number 2. He would have considered the security situation as well, because the pictures were scary. Protesters had surrounded the French military base. They carried coffins with French flags, even dressed up goats in French colors to slit their throat. So the public sentiment was dangerous. Plus the junta was putting pressure. Earlier this month, Macron had said his ambassador was being held hostage, that food had been cut off. So the current situation was not viable. President Macron alluded to that. He said France will not be held hostage by the military. Listen in.
It is the end of this cooperation because we are not here to participate in political life, to be hostages in some way to the putschists. But I will be very clear. We already see it today in Mali.
The junta is ecstatic. They're celebrating France's withdrawal. Listen to this statement. We celebrate another step towards Niger's sovereignty. Any person, institution or structure whose presence threatens the interest and outlook of our country will have to leave the land of our ancestors, whether they like it or not. That's what the junta has said. It's a victory for them. The junta took on the mighty French government and surprisingly they won. But what does this withdrawal mean for the region? For starters, it will take time. Macron did not go into the details. He said the withdrawal will be organized in the weeks to come. But in the long run, it means two things. One, reduce French presence in Africa, and two, a blow to anti-terror operations. Let's look at French influence first. Central and West Africa was French colonial territory. Even after independence, Paris held a lot of sway. In 2014, they launched what they called Operation Barkhane. It was a counter-terror operation. The mission was to drive out terrorists from the region. And did they? Well, it was a mixed bag. They've had some success, but the failures were much more dramatic and pronounced, especially in the last 3 years. One by one, former French colonies were hit by coups. There have been 9 coups since 2020, 9 coups. Mali began the wave of coups. Gabon was the latest. These new juntas had the same demand. France must go. As a result, Macron had to wind up his operations. French soldiers have left Mali and Burkina Faso. They will soon leave Niger, and chances are other Western countries will follow. There are more than 1,000 American troops in Niger. There is talk of pulling them out too. But will these withdrawals hurt the anti-terror operations? On paper, the juntas are tough on terror. But coups inevitably help non-state actors. It's a straight equation. Military coup equals instability. Instability equals chaos, and chaos equals great opportunity for terror groups. And the numbers support this. Around 8,000 people were killed in terror attacks last year. I'm talking about Central and Western Africa, 8,000 people. That's a 130% increase since 2020. So the coups have not improved the security situation in the region. They have made the economy worse. Thousands of young people are out of jobs now. They're angry and disenchanted. Basically, the ideal target for radicalization. It's a case of all-round failure. France failed to address the concerns around their military presence. You see, Niger was a former French colony. How would they think about hosting 1,500 French soldiers? Paris never bothered to know. Blame must also lie with Niger's civilian leadership. After all, the coup is a popular one. Around 30,000 people gathered in Niger's capital to back the junta. Why did they prefer the military over democracy? The politicians never bothered to understand. And finally, the coup leaders. Their solution to a real problem has made it much worse. All the anti-French rhetoric may help them now, but what's the long-term plan? Can they fight terror groups without Western support? I don't think even the junta knows. What's happening in Africa is a lesson for all leaders and policy makers, also generals, I guess. Good intentions alone are not enough. Your methods also count. Let's talk about India now and Indian startups. The past few months have not been kind to them. Funding has dried up, workers have been let go of, lots of firings, and now new business has been hard to come by. These are real challenges, but there's also a silver lining. A new survey is out. It looks into the global startup ecosystem. It's an assessment of the success rate of startups, and it rates India quite well. It says India has one of the highest levels of startup success. This survey puts India at number 4, right behind the US, China, and the UK. It says India has 429 scale-ups. Now, what are scale-ups? Companies which have raised over $50 million in funding. India has more than 400 of them. And collectively, these scale-ups have raised $127 billion in their lifetime. $127 billion. Such companies are also called mature startups. So what kind of companies are these? They have figured out their product, found a market for it, and they're making money. In other words, these are successful startups. Now, as per the survey, India has the 4th highest number of such successful startups. Of course, this does not guarantee future success. Every business has a share of ups and downs. Having said that, these numbers show a trend. In the Indian startup ecosystem, the success rate is better compared to the rest of the world. And what explains this trend? We took a closer look at this survey, and here's what it says. Companies that go global have a better chance of doing well. If more than 50% of your customers live abroad, your revenue will grow faster, possibly at double the speed. That's what the survey says. And many of these scale-ups have overseas customers. They also have another advantage. There is a large domestic market in India. This allows them to build a significant customer base, and the foreign customers bring more revenue. Successful startups often find a sweet spot, a balance between overseas and domestic customers. It also shows how Indian entrepreneurs have come of age. Earlier, most successful businesses were confined to a neighborhood, with a few notable exceptions, of course. But now more entrepreneurs are venturing abroad. The internet has eliminated many borders, and favorable policies have facilitated easier access to international markets. So the takeaway is, make in India for the world. And major companies are adopting this template, not just startups, even companies like Apple. This year, Indian factories are supplying the new iPhone. At the beginning of 2023, 5% of the world's iPhones were being made in India. Apple wants to scale this production. Reports say it plans to increase production by 5 times and make $40 billion worth of products in India. There is a push in the chip manufacturing sector too. America's Micron is building a new plant. It is coming up in the state of Gujarat. This is in Western India. Gujarat is also Prime Minister Modi's home state. Now, Micron is setting up a semiconductor plant here. It will assemble and test new chips. The company is investing $2.75 billion in this new facility. Construction began last week. The plant will start operations in 18 months. Again, Micron is following the same template. It wants to make chips in India and supply them to the world. And given this trend, more investment is expected to follow into the country. JP Morgan is a major American bank, and it has made a prediction. It says global investors have $2 trillion to invest. $2 trillion. They're looking for new places to invest, and India is a viable option. They could pour anywhere between $100 and $150 billion into India. So JP Morgan is optimistic about India. Its head of mergers and acquisitions has said, and I'm quoting, as we look at a combination of the inflows into the Indian market as well as the exits financial sponsors have successfully been able to do, that bodes well for more money getting deployed in India. It is hard to find a market like this which has the growth characteristics and stability as well as tech, healthcare, infra solutions that are being provided by a multitude of companies. So there is size, there is growth and plenty of attractive investment options. Although the global conditions remain tough, there is an economic downturn or a slowdown. But so far, India has proved to be an outlier. Just today, S&P released its growth forecast and it had a prediction for India as well. It says India will grow at 6% this year. This is slightly lower than India's own projection. India hopes to clock a GDP growth of 6.5% this year. Either way, it remains one of the fastest growing large economies in the world. India's startups and big businesses are in a good position to capitalize on this growth. From business bets to political ones, U.S. President Joe Biden is playing host today. His guests are from the Pacific Islands. You can barely spot them on the map, but these tiny islands are the new flashpoint, a new theater of U.S.-China tensions. So President Biden is wooing them or trying to woo them. He hosted 14 Pacific Island leaders last year, but this time things are off to a rocky start. 2 island countries are not attending: Solomon Islands and Vanuatu. Both of them have built closer relations with China, so clearly lines have been drawn. The White House has not openly talked about this divide. Instead, they are focused on common challenges like climate change. Listen in.
We'll be doing here. It will reaffirm his support for strengthening ties with the Pacific Islands and discuss how we address complex global challenges like tackling the existential threat of climate change, advancing economic growth, and promoting sustainable development. Over the past year, we've taken our engagement with PIF countries to new heights, and we're looking toward to continue to deepen our partnerships.
It's a charm offensive by Team Biden. He's flaunting America's soft power. Before the summit, the Pacific leaders attended a game of NFL. That's the National Football League. Many NFL stars are of Pacific Island heritage. But beyond that, what is Biden offering? Money and political support. That's what's on the table. The U.S. is planning to open new embassies in the Pacific. One in Cook Islands, the other in Niue. Until now, the U.S. had no diplomatic presence there. And it actually sums up their policy. Washington believed the Pacific was their backyard, and for many decades it was. But if you ignore your backyard, squatters will move in. For the US, that squatter is China. They've invested heavily in the region. Even security agreements. China and Solomon Islands struck a policing deal in 2022, and last month Beijing sent police experts to Vanuatu. So Washington was caught napping, and Biden is now playing catch-up. He hosted the first Pacific Island Summit last year. He promised more than $800 million in financial assistance. Just one problem, though. The U.S. Congress is yet to approve it. Such delays are dangerous for the Pacific Islands. After all, their biggest challenge is not China versus the U.S. Their biggest challenge is climate change. Sea levels are rising by 4 millimeters per year. That's higher than anywhere else in the world. So the Pacific Islands need help now. Can President Biden deliver on that? It's the biggest challenge of this summit, convincing the Pacific Islands to trust the U.S. Biden had some success earlier this year. He struck a security agreement with Papua New Guinea. The U.S. now has access to their bases and airports. They've also renewed agreements with Palau and Micronesia. These deals give the U.S. exclusive military access to the region. A similar deal is being negotiated with Marshall Islands. That's the quid pro quo here. There is no free lunch for the Pacific. The U.S. wants security alliances in return. I know it sounds like a raw deal, but recently more options have emerged. For example, France. Macron has been proposing a third way in the Pacific, one beyond the U.S. or China. Fiji has backed this vision. Their government has approved a security deal with France. India is also in the mix, by the way. Prime Minister Modi visited Papua New Guinea this year. His Global South pitch will find takers in the region. So there are options. It's all about finding the best bet. It's true that Biden and the US have a few advantages: a much bigger purse, a history of engagement, and key allies in the neighborhood. He'll be hoping to convert that advantage into results. Vantage continues after a short break.
would be done by all women workers of Bharatiya Janata Party. And in fact, when Prime Minister Modi is arriving there, then on the both sides of the road, you'll have women worker welcoming Prime Minister Modi, thanking Prime Minister Modi for this women's reservation bill, which has come to the fore and in fact passed by the Parliament's both houses, and therefore we are seeing that Prime Minister Modi is getting that welcome from the people of Rajasthan. He will of course be engaging with the audiences there. Prime Minister Modi will make sure that whenever he visits poll-bound states, he talk about those issues which are really mattering on the ground. And BJP has been actually targeting Congress party on three issues. One, of course, is women's safety. Second is the appeasement politics of the Congress party, and third is corruption. So these are the issues which BJP highlighted vis-a-vis Rajasthan is concerned in past couple of months.
Tell our audiences, Arun, we know that at least in the state of Rajasthan, anti-incumbency will work in the BJP's favour. But at the same time, the BJP, it seems, has had a difficult few months when it comes to their state unit. It seems, at least according to experts, that there are multiple claimants when it comes to the Chief Minister's position. Obviously, there's the former Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje, but there are also reports claiming that Satish Poonia, Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, CP Joshi, all are attempting to lay claim to that position. Can you bring us more context?
Well, see, as of now, BJP has made it very clear to all those leaders whom you've just named that the election will be fought under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. So there will not be any declaration of the chief ministerial candidate from the BJP's side, and that is, of course, to keep those objections under the wraps, because there are, of course, various leaders who have aspiration to have Vasundhara Raje.
Our next story is about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, one of the world's longest-running conflicts. Two countries are involved, Armenia and Azerbaijan. In the last 30 years, they have gone to war twice over this region. Last week, they almost started a third war. But Azerbaijan prevailed. A decisive Azeri operation sealed the fate of this region. Azerbaijan now controls this conclave, and it wants to make it part of their country. But the population here is largely Armenian, and they fear ethnic cleansing. So they're fleeing in large numbers. They're going to Armenia. Now, this crisis may be in the Caucasus, but it has multiple stakeholders. There's Russia that brokered the ceasefire and is being blamed for not doing enough. There's Turkey that is backing Azerbaijan. And then there's India too. India has a defense deal with Armenia, and reports suggest that India sent weapons in this conflict. So how is all of this playing out? Our next report tells you.
On Sunday, Petya Grigoryan walked into his new life in Armenia. The 69-year-old had lived in Nagorno-Karabakh all his life, but last week changed everything. Azerbaijan launched a lightning offensive in the region. It lasted for less than 24 hours, but the result was decisive. They defeated the Karabakh Armenian forces and essentially took control of the region.
The last days were, we barely survived as it was scary. There was shelling also from all sides. There were dead bodies.
This is one of the world's oldest running conflicts. It's a fight over this region, the region of Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a mountainous region in the South Caucasus. Internationally, it's recognized as part of Azerbaijan. But it has been controlled by ethnic Armenians for 3 decades. In the 1990s, Armenia and Azerbaijan fought a war over it. Tens of thousands lost their lives then. In 2020, the two nations fought again. Thousands more died. But this time, it was different. It was a quick and decisive offensive. The fighting erupted on the 19th of September. Azerbaijani forces made quick gains. The Karabakh forces were caught off guard. Soon, a ceasefire was declared. Karabakh forces would give up their arms and Nagorno-Karabakh would officially be integrated into Azerbaijan. This was meant to settle the decades-long conflict. But for ethnic Armenians living there, it means uprooting their lives and starting all over again. Azerbaijan says Karabakh residents will enjoy the same rights, but there are fears of ethnic cleansing. So these residents are now fleeing to Armenia.
We don't know what happens to us next. We don't know what the government has in store for us. We can't go back there. It's too dangerous. If we could, we would not leave.
Armenia says all refugees are welcome. Yerevan has already made plans to house them. Karabakh has a population of around 120,000 ethnic Armenians. Over 5,000 have already reached Armenia.
Unless real living conditions are created for the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh in their homes and effective mechanisms of protection from ethnic cleansing, then the likelihood that the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh will see exile from their homeland as the only way to preserve their lives and identity increases significantly.
But while Armenia may be welcoming refugees with open arms, the Pashinyan government is facing a lot of backlash. One, for recognizing Karabakh as Azeri territory, and two, for failing to prepare for a mass exodus. But who does Pashinyan blame? Russia. Armenia has long depended on Moscow for security, and Russia's refusal to enter the latest conflict hasn't gone down very well with Armenia. In fact, Yerevan is already signaling a policy shift. The Armenian PM called the current security alliances ineffective. He said that Armenia should join the International Criminal Court, a direct swipe at Moscow, given that the ICC has issued an arrest warrant for Putin for his war crimes in Ukraine. On paper, there's a ceasefire and a move to resolve the long-running conflict, but on the ground, there's confusion, fear, and a sense of abandonment. The fighting may have stopped, but the crisis in the Caucasus is far from over.
From Russia losing old friends to the US making new ones. Let's turn our attention to Southeast Asia. It seems the US plans to send its jets to Vietnam. Not in the way it did in the 60s and 70s. This time, Washington apparently wants to sell the weapons to Hanoi. Reports say a deal is in the works for America to sell a fleet of F-16 fighter jets to Vietnam. Now, of course, there are a few problems. First and foremost, F-16s are expensive. Vietnam may not be able to afford them. So lawmakers in Washington are chalking out financial options, special terms that will give Vietnam competitive rates and a long payment time frame. But there's no guarantee that this will work out. The deal is still in the early phase, but it signals intent. It shows that the US is prepared to replace Vietnam's traditional allies. President Biden visited the country earlier this month. He was in New Delhi for the G20 summit, and from here he flew to Hanoi. They signed some deals, and Vietnam upgraded its ties with the US. It now calls America a comprehensive strategic partner. That's the highest diplomatic level for Vietnam. Only a few other countries have this, including Russia and China. These are the allies that America now wants to replace. In fact, the F-16 deal could be aimed at Russia because Moscow is Hanoi's primary arms dealer. But the supply has dwindled off late. Russia has been busy in Ukraine. It doesn't have weapons to spare. And the US wants to make the most of this, to muscle into Moscow's turf. So an F-16 deal will not go down well with Russia. But Vietnam would be more worried about China, because Beijing has been watching these developments and fuming. It issued a warning during Biden's visit to Hanoi. Take a look at this.
China believes that the development of bilateral relations between countries should not target a third party. It should not jeopardize regional peace, stability, development, and prosperity.
China talking about regional peace is epic. The fact is, Vietnam is looking to buy American weapons because of the threat that China poses. Vietnam is already among the top 20 arms importers in the world, and that is because of China's aggression. Beijing bullies countries around the South China Sea. It claims almost the entire water body. But 5 other players have competing claims: Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, and the Philippines. They have exclusive economic zones in these waters, and China denies them access. China has also occupied disputed islands and militarized some of them. So in the face of this Chinese buildup, Vietnam is turning to the US. And then the US has its own plans, including diversifying supply chains.
We're strengthening our supply chains, including through the new semiconductor memorandum of cooperation that we signed today. We're deepening our collaboration on critical technologies like cloud computing, telecommunications, and artificial intelligence, which we should watch very carefully, I might add again.
Biden spoke about working with Vietnam on critical technologies. Now, this includes the manufacturing of rare earth metals. These metals appear as silvery and soft. They're used to make electronics, lasers, magnets, magnetic material, and so on. Vietnam has an abundance of rare earth metals, but they've not been able to harness this wealth. Again, courtesy China. You see, China is a global leader in rare earths. It holds about 44% of the world's known deposits. And it has spent years building this monopoly. Whenever another country wants to explore its deposits, China manipulates prices. It sends the value of rare earth metals crashing down. And this makes it unprofitable for countries to invest in them. That's the reason why Vietnam's largest rare earth metal mine has been lying dormant for years. But that may change soon. The U.S. and its allies have plans. They want to prop up Vietnam as a counter to China. Hanoi has floated bids for multiple blocks of its largest mine, and an Australian firm is reportedly interested in this. It's called Blackstone Minerals. It may invest about $100 million to secure mining rights. It will work in partnership with a Vietnamese firm, and that's just the first step. Beijing monopolizes not just the metal supply, but also its refining. China refines, and listen to this, China refines about 90% of the world's rare earth. That's right, 90%. Even the US sends rare earth to China for refining. Now, Vietnam wants to change that, and they plan to do it with some help from South Korea. The idea is to build a rare metal supply chain, one that is independent of China. And this move has Washington written all over it. This weekend, a video from last year came to the fore. It was shot at a gymnastics event in Dublin, the capital city of Ireland. A sporting official was seen handing out medals to young gymnasts. All the participating girls were standing in a line. Every one of them got a medal, everyone except for one. The only black girl in the group did not get a medal. The video went viral. It prompted condemnation from far and wide, including Olympic giant Simone Biles. She said, and I'm quoting, "There is no room for racism in any sport." As international outrage and allegations of racism mounted, the Irish sports body issued an apology, a lukewarm one, 18 months after the incident. Now, the girl's family says too little too late, and they're right. Our next report tells you why.
This video is from March last year. It shows a medal ceremony at a gymnastics event held in the Irish capital of Dublin. You can see young gymnasts lined up, patiently but excitedly awaiting their medal. Every girl gets a medal, except for one, the only black girl there. The sporting official avoids her and moves on to the next in line. At first, the young girl is surprised, doesn't understand what's happening. But soon her smile turns into a sigh. She looks at the line ahead to see if the official would come back with a medal. But no one does. No one intervenes either. There's an audience of hundreds in the stands, also a photographer, a coach, and other officials. Everyone simply looks on. This weekend, the video went viral. It got over 40 million views and received condemnation from across the world. Olympic champion Simone Biles said there is no room for racism in any sport or at all. Her teammate and Olympic winner Jordan Chiles said this is beyond hurtful on so many levels. The girl's mother says her daughter was ignored because of her identity. Last year, the parents issued a complaint of racism. For 18 months, the Irish sports body Gymnastics Ireland did not apologise to the family. Instead, they held an investigation and simply asked both parties to talk it out. They declined to attend the mediation. In August this year, they claimed both parties had reached a resolution. The official involved expressed deep regret. She described it as an honest error. After international condemnation mounted, a written apology was eventually provided to the family. But the young girl's mother has rubbished it. She says the issue wasn't settled after mediation, and the apology was a one-line letter, which started with, "To whom it concerns." Doesn't really scream remorse now, does it? During mediation, the girl's mother discovered that the judge had written another apology, a long personal letter, within days of the competition. The judge sent it to the Irish body to send it to the family, but it never reached them. Meanwhile, no anti-racism policies were implemented. There was no improvement in protection for athletes of colour. It appears that the Irish body was more focused on protecting its reputation rather than safeguarding the athletes from blatant racism. And this is not a one-off incident by any means. Racism is pervasive, no matter the age group, no matter the sport. There were 137 instances of racism in sports in 2018 the world over, a sharp increase from the 79 in 2017. According to a global survey held last year, 14% of professional cricketers experienced racism. Almost 2/3 of the victims said they did not receive adequate support from their boards afterwards. In a much-talked-about scandal this year, Real Madrid star Vinicius Jr. was the target of racist abuse. In 2018, Russia was charged with fan racism. It was the host of the FIFA World Cup, where fans directed monkey chants at players of the French national team. In a separate incident, fans chanted Nazi slogans. Last year, Italian rugby star Sheriff Traore got a banana for Secret Santa. Traore was born in Guinea. He said the most difficult part of the incident was seeing most of his mates laughing as if everything is normal. Cricket, football, rugby, tennis, gymnastics. Racism ails every sport, much like it ails our society. The young gymnast's video went viral, but one can only imagine similar cases that go unheard, unseen. Again we ask, who is looking after them? Where are the guardrails? The onus must lie with sports authorities, because racism is never fun and games.
And now let's talk about a 6 billion kilometer voyage. Not by a human, of course, that would be crazy, but by NASA's saucer-shaped capsule. It was in the space for 7 years. On Sunday, it parachuted back to Earth and successfully landed in a desert in the U.S. state of Utah. It holds precious cargo, about 5 billion years old chunks of space rock, the largest soil sample ever scooped up from the surface of an asteroid. But that's not what makes it so special. This sample comes from one of the most dangerous rocks in space, and it could tell us a whole lot about the birth of our solar system. Here's a report.
Phenomenal view of that streaking SRC coming in across the sky.
Yesterday, the arid landscape of Utah desert was brimming with drama, with scenes that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie. All thanks to NASA's saucer-shaped capsule, ORISES-REx. As you can tell, it's a futuristic-looking picture of stillness. But all around it, scientists were swinging into action. After a 7-year-long and 6 billion kilometer voyage, ORISES-REx finally parachuted to Earth, carrying precious cargo, chunks of space rock that are 4.6 billion years old. As soon as it landed, it was a race against time. Scientists and military personnel dashed to the capsule to recover it as quickly as possible. Why is that? So the samples aren't contaminated, and to make sure that everything is under control, because these chunks belong to the most dangerous known rock in the solar system, asteroid Bennu. Now, what is an asteroid?
So asteroids are the leftover remnants from solar system formation. So they're a pristine example of planetary building blocks, and studying them helps us to understand how the Earth and all of the planets in our solar system were formed.
And that's exactly what the scientists are planning to do. This is the largest soil sample ever collected from an asteroid's surface. And it has an even bigger responsibility. We told you how this space rock is 4.6 billion years old. Do you know how old the solar system is? 4.6 billion years exactly. Which means Bennu's rocks could provide crucial insights. They could give us fresh insights on how the solar system was formed and how life started on Earth. On top of this, there is a good chance Bennu will hit our planet in the next 300 years. And scientists want to stay ahead of the curve. So what's next for them?
We currently have a team of spacecraft engineers, scientists, and curatorial personnel working right now in a temporary clean room here at Dugway to make the sample capsule ready for transport down to the Johnson Space Center so that we can open it up and reveal this treasure.
Tomorrow, smaller specimens of the samples will be parceled to some 200 scientists in 60 laboratories around the world. Scientists will begin with studying the composition. Once that is covered, they will sneak a peek into answers for the bigger questions.
But we think we've got a lot of sample in that science canister, and we can't wait to crack into it. For me, the real science is just beginning. The key objective for me, and one of the driving objectives of this program, is to try to understand, did carbon-rich asteroids like Bennu deliver the compounds that may have led to the origin of life on our planet?
No matter the answer, this mission is already a success. These are NASA's first asteroid samples fetched from deep space, and by the looks of it, scientists can't wait to dig deeper into them.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In the Netherlands, football club Ajax's clash with Feyenoord was abandoned after furious fans threw flares on the pitch. In Canada, a joyride turned into a horror show after visitors were stuck upside down for 30 minutes due to a malfunction. That's one ride you don't want to be on. And in Germany, the world's largest beer festival, the Munich Oktoberfest, is currently underway. It has attracted 3.4 million visitors so far. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1926, the Slavery Convention was signed by 20 countries at the League of Nations. All signatories had to eliminate slavery and slave trade in their territories, but the convention offered some exemptions. Britain used these exemptions for its colonies in Myanmar and India. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Is everybody doing okay up there?
Former Chief Minister of Rajasthan and a very strong leader, and therefore you have other leaders as well like Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, C.P. Joshi, Rajendra Rathod. So without taking any risk, BJP is giving clear indication that they will fight this election under the leadership and on the face of Prime Minister Modi. And once, if they form the government, then they will decide who's going to be leading the Bharatiya Janata Party there in the state. And that is perhaps the reason why that message, in fact, has been given to all state leaders that we have to fight this election collectively. So there shouldn't be any, individual campaigning or etc. And that was the reason why, if you see that Parivartan Yatra, which happened in Rajasthan, that was not led by one person. There were 4 yatras, which was led by 4 different leaders.
Arun, thank you for those details.
Hello and welcome to CNN News 18 with me Ayushman Singh Jamwal. As the diplomatic standoff continues between India and Canada, CNN News 18 has accessed a government dossier on Khalistani elements inside Canada. This is the big piece of breaking news that's coming in. The government dossier states that pro-Khalistani elements are duping gullible Sikh youth from Punjab with promises of jobs and then exploiting them for pro-Khalistani activities inside Canada. Now, as per the dossier, this is what the government dossier states. Pro-Khalistani elements control over 30 gurudwaras in Canada and offer Sikh youth in Canada asylum letters for about 1 to 2 lakh rupees. So that's the piece of breaking news that's coming in, where we are trying to decode the entire Khalistani infrastructure inside Canada, ladies and gentlemen. So what we are learning from this entire dossier is that you have pro-Khalistani elements duping Sikh youth inside Punjab, bringing them over into Canada and then exploiting them for Khalistani activities. They are promised not just jobs, but they also charge them about 1 to 2 lakh rupees for asylum letters. So this is the entire nexus that is in place inside Canada when it comes to the entire Khalistani agenda. I'm joined by my colleague Arunima, who's getting us this piece of breaking news. Arunima, give us the details.
So what the Indian government agencies have put together is a full modus operandi so far about the gangsters in Punjab and their networking with Khalistani operatives based in Canada who are getting support from Pakistan. So there are a lot of students from Punjab who aspire to go to Canada because they think there are more job prospects there, there are better standards of living there. A lot of them, however, don't make the cut. They don't get the kind of job after finishing off their degrees, the kind of jobs that would help them repay student loan if they have taken any, or repay loans that their families might have taken against their agricultural land. So these people then become easy target as per assessment by Indian agencies. The Khalistani groups promised them that they were going to sponsor their extended stay in Canada. In return, they should become recruits of these Khalistani groups. So that's one case, and this is being called human trafficking by the Indian agencies. The second that we've already broken is that how Punjab has become a recruitment ground for these people. People who want to go abroad for a better life, they are promised visa, they are promised tickets to Canada. The question that the Indian agencies are asking is that any normal person, if he wants to visit Canada, visa doesn't come by so easily. So how is it that these Khalistani supporters are ensuring visas for their recruits? That is something Canadian authorities must look into.
Absolutely. So could there be connivance from the Canadian government itself when it comes to empowering this entire Khalistani infrastructure? So thank you, Arunima, for joining us on the broadcast with that piece of breaking news. So as we are learning, what you see with the Khalistani infrastructure inside Canada is that they pick Khalistani, Sikh youth, inside Punjab for the entire Khalistani agenda. They offer them jobs, they offer them letters for political asylum, bring them over into Canada and then exploit them for Khalistani activity. So that is the infrastructure in place. And could we see connivance from the Canadian government when it comes to facilitating all that paperwork to bring those Sikh youth all the way from Punjab into Canada? So let's decode the entire situation that the Trudeau government finds itself in. Joining me on the broadcast is Kirk Lubimov, policy analyst from Canada. Thank you, Mr. Lubimov, for joining us on CNN News 18. How do you see Justin Trudeau's actions? Now let's focus on what happened in Parliament just a few moments back. Justin Trudeau honored a person who fought for the Nazis inside Parliament. He was standing next to Zelensky when that entire thing happened. The Polish ambassador to Canada has sought an apology, accusing the Canadian government of whitewashing villains, something that we are seeing with Khalistani radicals inside Canada as well. Is this just a gaffe by the Trudeau government or on brand given the PR disasters we have seen in the last few weeks?
Well, I think there's two aspects here. I think we continue to see a trend of carelessness and absolute disaster from one disaster to another disaster. The Speaker of the House of Commons took responsibility for this incident. I'm not sure how he's been vetted. I mean, if you took basic or have basic knowledge of World War II, if you fought against the Russians, you fought for the bad guys. So, which the bad guys in this case were the Nazis, of course. So, you know, to bring someone like that to the House of Commons, to, you know, our political ground zero, if you will, and give him a standing ovation is absolutely absurd. And it's and we still even haven't seen a proper apology from Justin Trudeau. Like, he should have taken immediately the steps and be a leader, which is something he is afraid of doing. He's a leader by convenience. And it's a shame that he couldn't just make a video. Like, he loves taking selfies. He likes taking, he took a selfie video with Zelensky when he was here, and he could have done the same thing and apologized to the country, but he chose not to do so.
Right, so he refused to address that entire, controversy which erupted from Parliament. Let's talk about the rise of Khalistani influence within Canada, Mr. Lubimov. Do you think Justin Trudeau is a hostage to the Khalistani agenda, to Khalistani politics? Is this a Trudeau-specific problem or something every person vying for political power